Good afternoon. Welcome back to Oneida Live here on the Oneida Nation Reservation in Wisconsin. I'm Bobbi Webster and we're into September. Today is Tuesday, September 2nd, and we have a great show for you today. We want to talk about something that's very important, not just in Oneida, but in Indian country. We want to talk about some things like, oh goodness, sorry about that. I have to turn my volume down. Sorry about that, folks. So today we're going to talk about dementia and Alzheimer's, and that's something that as we get older, we all think about it, we all worry about it with ourselves, our parents, our grandparents, our aunts, and our family, and our uncles and such. So we're going to talk about that today with Carey Gleason. Dr. Gleason is out of the University of Madison, and she's done a lot of work and a lot of studying and research, along with Sacheen Lawrence, who's an outreach specialist as well. I've known them both for a while, for at least 5 years, as they've been working on this project. And specifically to Oneida, they've been doing a lot of work and a whole lot of studying on how it affects our community, as well as they work with the other tribes in Wisconsin. Now, I met them through the Great Lakes Native American Elders Association, and that's all elders that meet quarterly throughout the year on different reservations. So they've been involved and face-to-face and front and center with the elders in the Wisconsin Native communities, done a lot of work, and very well trusted and very well respected out there in our country. So without further ado, Dr. Gleason, we'd like you to start the presentation, and Sacheen, jump in when you need to.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Bobbi. It's a real honor to be here today and to talk to folks about something that is incredibly important and affects a lot of people. And it's in my family as well, so it's something I have a personal investment in this. I don't know if Sacheen, you want to say a few words before I get started?
Nope, not really.
Okay, all right. So I'm Carey Gleason, as Bobbi mentioned, and I want to first just start with a land acknowledgement that we are, of course, on land that has been ceded by indigenous communities. I live and work on land that was taken forcibly from the Ho-Chunk Nation. So I want to acknowledge, too, that that is something that my own family has personally benefited from the colonization and settlement by white settlers throughout the decades. So my hope is that I wanted to do something different, and partnering with the Oneida Nation is sort of an attempt, at least, to sort of right some wrongs that my own family has benefited from. It started with a conversation in 2015, so it's already been 10 years. Mm-hmm. It's hard to believe. But what this led to was a sense that there's a great need or interest in having greater awareness and more education around Alzheimer's disease in Indian communities. And our center, we sought to respond to that interest and education needs. And it started, like I mentioned, with a conversation. So if we go to this next, the growth of collaboration slide. So it started with a conversation at an Alzheimer's disease conference in the Dells. So someone asked our team, an outreach specialist, someone who's working in Sacheen's position, what's known about dementia in Indian country? And we had to ask ourselves, why have we not addressed that question before?
Excuse me, Dr. Gleason, our slides aren't coming up.
You're just on a delay. They are.
Okay, all right. Sorry about that.
That's
all right,
okay.
Thank you.
So it's led to this illustration of the tree here was just to demonstrate that how it started with this seed and actually is branched in so many different directions, and directions that I'm not at the center of it leading. A lot of it is indigenous led, which is, I think, incredibly important and meaningful. So if we go to the next slide, this next slide is very busy. It's a timeline, not meant to necessarily be read in its entirety, but just the idea that this is something that started first with conversations and eventually led to research projects. So it started with some partnerships with committees being started. So the Oneida Community Advisory Board was one of the first efforts that we initiated in Oneida. And the idea was to make sure that whatever we do, education, outreach, is something that is informed by communities' perspectives. And that's what the Oneida Community Advisory Board really is centered on. Research started in earnest in 2019, and it started with the project that I'll talk about in a few minutes that was really just a sort of a gentle introduction to research where we wanted to just first ask for people's perspectives on what dementia meant for their community and how it affected them. So I'll get into each of these a bit more as we go along. But the main message of this slide is to show that this has been an ongoing process for a decade. Our next slide is the why behind this. So maybe this is evident to people listening to this conversation, but this is something that's incredibly important for Indigenous populations because they're at high risk. So this is something that we'll be focused on in order to make sure that those who are at highest risk are those who are likely to benefit from the discoveries. There's a lot happening. I've been doing this work for 20-some years already, and we are at a real inflection point. There is exciting discoveries being made around treatments, around diagnosing, and prevention strategies as well. So again, this is the why behind this, is to make sure that those most affected by the disease are right there at the table, being first to get the benefits of this research. So how is this done? The question that I get is sort of the right way to do this, to address the why. For me, this is very much guided by my colleagues here at Oneida and my friends in academics who are Indigenous, who describe that the right way to do this is to make sure that we're honoring data sovereignty and sample sovereignty, that these samples are under control of Oneida, have oversight, that they have oversight ability, and they can say yes or no whether or not data are used in certain ways. So oversight by the nation. So anything that we put out has oversight by Oneida Comprehensive Health Division, who review anything that we are putting out for publication. And then the co-design side of it is that community voices are involved in the work. So this is, to me, again, a way to sort of make sure that we're doing the research in ways that has longevity, has integrity, and also is done in ways that are aligned with the values of Oneida. So the Community Advisory Board, just a brief word about who they are. They are folks who volunteer to meet with us every month, to be part of the research design and input. So they are, if we go to the tree picture here, I'm just going to focus a little bit on that, a couple of branches, but again I want to acknowledge there are several other branches of this work that are still part of our conversations, but for today's limited time together, I'll just focus on a couple of those branches. The Community Advisory Board, the goals of the Community Advisory Board are to make sure that there's culturally tailored education, outreach, and research, that we're not doing things that are not aligned with the values of Oneida. They also sought to make sure that we're reaching middle-aged adults, as well as military veterans, and maybe the youth who are caring for people with dementia. And why middle-aged and military veterans? We know that the disease starts decades before the onset of symptoms. And also military veterans, we also know are at increased risk for dementia. The committee also sought to work to reduce stigma associated with dementia. Again, believing that if you reduce stigma, people are more likely to engage in maybe treatment strategies or detection and prevention strategies that would benefit them. And then to continue to support culturally competent dementia diagnostics. And again, I'm not talking about this today, but there's an arm of this work that is working very closely with Oneida Comprehensive Health Division to bring to the tribe access to some of the best diagnostic procedures. So going on to the current projects. I'm going to talk about 3 of them today and give you contact information if you have more questions about any of these. These are ongoing projects that we're actively seeking participants to take part in this work. So I'll start with the eye care project. And what you'll see here is a flyer that we have that details, it's probably a lot more than you can read on the screen. But importantly, you have contact information with Ms. Marlene Summers and Ms. Lois Metoxen, including their phone numbers there. The eye care project, as I mentioned, was our first one that we launched in partnership with Oneida. Again, it's approved by the business committee, but the goal of it is to understand the experience of dementia for Indigenous communities. So Oneida is one of several other communities who are participating in this work. The goal is to say that we want to know what it's like for Indigenous communities to cope with the disease, to understand it, to care for those they love, and to make sure that whatever we do, whatever initiatives we start, are informed by the cultural understanding. So the data that are collected are all interview-based. There's no sample collection. So the participants honor us by telling us their story of what it's like. So currently we are recruiting individuals who have memory loss as well as their family members to talk about it. There's having a family member myself who had dementia, there's a lot of heartfelt discussion that oftentimes happens where the person maybe talks about some of their fears. There's sometimes the intent to make sure that we maintain the dignity for the person who has memory loss. All of these are such important conversations that will help us do a better job in everything we do in Indian country. So the eye care project, again, if you are interested in hearing more about that or maybe even taking part, we're interested in talking to people who have memory loss in the early stages as well as their family members. So, and oftentimes it's family members who are the points of contact for us, who are willing to hopefully tell us your story from the experience of living with dementia. The next project I'll mention is the Yawʌ:kó project, and it stands for American Indigenous Cognitive Assessment. The goal of it is to make sure that whatever we do for cognitive assessment works for Indigenous populations. So you can see that there are 3 partner sites. Oneida is one of those 3 partner sites with Red Lake in Minnesota and Albuquerque urban Indian population. And the idea is to adapt a set of cognitive tests and interviews that were used initially in a group out of Australia called the Kimberley. And the Kimberley assessment was adapted in part for a Canadian population. And now what we want to do is make sure it works with American Indigenous populations. Really important because if the tools that we're using to assess dementia don't work for Indigenous populations, it's a disservice. How do we actually accurately recognize the disease in that case? So the adaptation phase consisted of 2 parts. In that first part, the KICA, the Kimberley Indigenous Cognitive Assessment, was adapted to the Canadian Indigenous Cognitive Assessment. And then what happened is we, with the help of traditional knowledge keepers throughout the country, adapted the KICA and the two KICAs into the Yawʌ:kó to make sure that it hit the right tone, that it was appropriate, that whatever we were using to ask our memory questions was something that was relevant to American Indigenous populations. These are the sites I mentioned that were involved, and again, shout out to our traditional knowledge keepers for their help in helping us make this adaptation. So the outcome from this is the data that are collected are, of course, the cognitive assessments. The outcome would be a culturally safe cognitive screening test that could be used by tribal communities throughout the U.S. Contact there is Cassandra Thomas. Also involved are Carey Gleason and Dr. Gullah Cornelius. So in this one, we will be recruiting individuals who are willing to complete the cognitive assessment for us and try it out. And we want people who are cognitively healthy as well as people who have some memory loss. So we are going to be pretty much looking for anybody who's willing to take the test. You'll qualify. All right, next I'll be talking about the Wisconsin Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. We also call ourselves for short the ADRC, which is a little confusing because I know there's another ADRC out there.
Aging disability.
Yes, so we happen to be the Alzheimer's group of this. We are one of 30-some centers that are funded throughout the United States. We're the only one in Wisconsin. There's one, of course, in Minnesota. There's one in Michigan, and several in Chicago. So in the Midwest area, our goal is to make sure that we're including representative populations in these longitudinal studies where we're asking people to come back every year. More and more, we're seeing the power of data that are collected over time. Because this disease is something that doesn't come on overnight, it's something that I mentioned earlier that happens probably 15 to 20 years before the onset of symptoms. So we really do need to follow people over the long term to really understand how it's changing or how it shows up over the course of a person's lifetime. Visits right now are happening in Madison. We're hoping to change that eventually, but at this time we ask people to come down to Madison. And the BC approved this in 2022 for us to recruit actually at Oneida. The study, here's the contact information. Sacheen, my partner in this work, is looking for folks who are willing to join the study. It involves, and this one does involve, the first time we've asked people to give not just data but also samples. And the samples are used here in Madison, in Madison, and the idea is that that's still under the control of the business committee and the Oneida Nation. Those samples are not sent out to other centers or to other researchers. And whatever research we do with those samples has to be approved by the Oneida Comprehensive Health Division. So again, I go back to the why. So this is, I'm hoping, Bobbi, that your listeners have lots of questions for me about this. For example, why are American Indians at increased risk compared to other racialized groups? And also some of the really exciting things that are happening right now in the field for treatments and diagnosing and prevention. I can tell you, in all honesty, the indigenous populations of the U.S. Are under-included in this research. And that, to me, is sort of the problem because, again, we want those groups who are most affected by the disease to be front and center, to be benefiting from the treatments and the possibly someday cures. So these 3 projects, as I mentioned, are all looking for participants or research volunteers. Again, what we're doing is people who want to tell us a story of their experiences with dementia for the Eye Care project, the Yawʌçkó, people willing to help us develop this cognitive testing. So you have to be willing to go through a memory checkup. Again, we're looking for people who are cognitively healthy as well as those who have memory loss. And then the Alzheimer's Disease Clinical Core, people who are willing to come down to Madison at this point. Again, we're hoping to change that, to join this longitudinal study where they complete annual memory checkups. So a summary of the impact. This was a big question that I get a lot, is like, well, how does this help the Oneida? A couple of principles that I always try to follow in all of this work is that making sure that the community directly benefits from the research. So we hire from the community is one way, so making sure that we're building capacity. And that each of these projects has a specific theme that is directly related to the health of Oneida. So for the community advisory board, or the Community Advisory Board, the CAB, making sure that Oneida has a voice in this work. And I've witnessed it, of how we come in with one idea for research, and in the course of the conversation, it gets completely changed or altered in ways that are more meaningful to the community. The lived experience of eye care, the lived experience of dementia that's documented in eye care is that the Oneida voice gets included in whatever we do as we build new programs. The diagnostic tests that we do with Yawʌ๊kó is to make sure that it's working for Oneida. Already we know that the Oneida Comprehensive Health Division hopes to use the Yawʌ๊kó test in future work in the clinic. So, and we could say with confidence then that this is something that will work for Oneida. And with the Alzheimer's Disease Research Centers, to make sure that Oneida citizens are included in work that is used then to later treat, test for, diagnose dementia going forward. And ultimately, my hope is prevention. Capacity building is a huge part of everything we do. We hire from the community. Our goal is to make sure that we're located in community, that we work with Oneida businesses, and we support Indigenous leadership. I say oftentimes that I see myself as a placeholder. I want this work to be Indigenous-led. So my goal is always to make sure that I'm working with trainees who can take this work over from me, and that we build it, as I mentioned earlier, in a good way, in the right way. So there are several proposed projects, but maybe I'll take a moment just to pause, Bobbi, to see if you had any questions come in, or if you had any questions for me so far about the work that we have going on at the moment.
Yeah. In terms of the project and having people from Oneida, sort of like the ground floor, working on it, and having people from the university, everybody who's involved in it, it's a pretty variable group of people. I know in Oneida, I've heard the discussion on it, and people are a little skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
Why are they studying Oneida? So, are they going to sell this information? Again, are they coming in taking advantage of Indian people?
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to sort of allay their fears to, this is really more for you than it is for anybody else? You meaning the Oneida community.
Sure. And I absolutely appreciate that comment. And it's because of the history of people historically have come in and taken advantage of people. And I understand that the research community is no exception to that, coming in and harvesting basically data for their own gain. To allay those concerns, I would say that skepticism is healthy. Ask those questions, like how is this data being used? So the data, again, are under the control of Oneida. So this is something that there is oversight by Oneida entities to make sure that the data are not being sold, not being distributed outside of the agreed upon arrangements. And none of our funding is from pharmaceutical companies. We are only funded by the National Institutes of Health, which is us. It's a publicly funded research endeavor. And the idea was with those are all then belong back to the public. They're not something that can be used for profit. So.
And then for Sacheen, as an Oneida enrolled individual and being involved in this for a number of years, what got your interest in it, and how do you play a role in this project?
So what got my interest is I started working at Oneida Elder Services as an administrative assistant. So I wasn't really into like the whole, older community at that time. I started working there, and then they started coming in with their meetings, and that's probably when they first started coming into the community, and I just kind of started joining in their meetings, listening to them, and I was like more of a minute taker at that time. So more and more, like I started gaining interest, and then even being involved in elder service activities, I started learning more about like what's going on in the elder population and how everything is starting to affect them and what they needed at that time. And then COVID hit, and then I lost my job. And then Carey was very willing to like work with me on another different project, and then I kind of just transitioned over into this because of my background in my education. So And then I started really enjoying learning more and more. And plus, my grandfather, he passed away like from Parkinson's, which is a form of dementia. So, and then it started really personally affected me. Like, so I'm really starting to learn, and I really enjoy working with the community more, and I get to meet new people. Like at Glenea, I just love talking to everybody, and they have so many stories to tell. So it's a learning experience for me, and just being in the community, like in the community is what is like the best part of it too.
That, I wanted you to talk about that because people look at you and they, feel a little bit more comfortable that our own people are really, and you're not just giving us names or you really are and have been involved in that. So I think that's really a testament to how the community, is invested and how they do play a role here. So the other thing I did want to say was as we get older, we just naturally forget things. And so, I think back when my mom was alive, and she's been gone about 20 years, but she used to say, oh, I just forget so much. I wonder if I've got dementia or if I've got, she always wondered, and I don't think she ever did, but how can we tell the difference when we just feel like, oh, I forgot that, or sometimes I forgot what I was going to say.
That's such a good question.
Something like that, or I came into the room. What did I come in here for? How can we tell, the difference from it, or when we should get tested?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is absolutely. I've talked to so many people, and my husband and I joke about this too. Like we both have family history of Alzheimer's disease. It's something that I encourage people to try not to get too worried about. I would say that the time to pay attention is oftentimes the family members are noticing it, maybe more than the person themselves. And I would say my advice is always set aside the worry and actually just proactively start taking care of your brain. There was a great set of research data that came out this summer that showed that there are lifestyle things that you can be doing that really influence your cognitive changes over time. So things like getting healthy sleep, exercising, socializing, taking, diet is also incredibly important. All of those things are just great ways to take care of your brain. So to the extent like when to, I'm not answering your question directly, but I would say pay attention if your family says to me, you seem to be forgetting things more. Then I'd pay attention to that. We all notice the slips that we have. We're going to have slips. We're more attuned to them, of course, as we get older.
That's when I think it's perceived as an elderly affliction more so than middle-aged or even younger, but those are the things that we know you can start paying attention to, as you're saying. And there's a comment in here that's kind of interesting. Will the outcome also be used to inform current activities as health care and elder programs? And I think what they're talking about here is pay attention to your diet, pay attention to your mental exercises, to your physical exercises. So it's interesting that a comment came in that is just, exactly, I think, what you were trying to talk about.
Yep, and I do think some of the data that we do bring in can be used for like strategic plans for like the nation. So I think it's good that people do join, and I do want to encourage people to join like presentations we put on throughout the year, because that's a lot of good educational resources. Just look out for them. We do publicize them. We got one coming up this Friday on the biomarkers, actually, for the clinical core. So
I've seen that. And when you talk about putting it in your strategic plans, that's something I've been in strategic planning for 100 years, all over. I mean, in every venue the tribe has, and I've never seen that as a part of it. I think that is really important.
Yeah.
Now that at that older age, I'm seeing that, this should be a part, how your body, your mental, and all your physical health, all those things, how we progress through the ages, and include that in strategic planning for the entire community. That's an excellent point to get across.
I think the Oneida would be a light year ahead of a lot of communities that are less organized in terms of being able to plan for healthy aging.
Okay.
All right,
Here we
so next I was going to move to some proposed projects. These are ones that either are maybe initially approved by the BC, but they're not funded yet, or they're in some way in development. So the first one I'll mention is the NARCH, and this is something that is co-led by Dr. Cornelius and Janelle Lupke out of, Janelle Lupke is faculty at the School of Nursing. And the goal of the NARCH, it's Native American Research Centers for Health, and it's actually the award would go to Glitzy, and Janelle and Gullah would have a subcontract to have in place a nursing focused training site here at Oneida. So it really, again, we think about that capacity building and making sure that we're training the next generation. This is very much at the heart of that. It is, at this point, it got a great score, like the second best application that the committee saw. So we're very hopeful that this will get funded. And if it starts, they expect the notice of award was supposed to come in August. We haven't heard yet, but we anticipate that this would be something that would be coming our way. And again, led by our Oneida's own Dr. Cornelius. So that is one that is close to starting up. Other ones that are a little further down the line in terms of their development, something called the IBACS. Stands for the Indigenous Behavioral Cognitive Symptom Checklist Project. It's a lot, it's a mouthful. But the goal of the IBACS is to understand how, we talked about like recognizing symptoms, and I mentioned that family oftentimes recognizes it. There are some behavioral things that you don't have to do a cognitive test necessarily, but you can ask the questions of the family. Like, have they changed in how they act towards you? Are they maybe there's a little coarsening, maybe they're more disinhibited. These are all behavioral signs that can predate the cognitive symptoms. So the idea is to adapt a questionnaire that gets at that type of change in personality. Again, a different way to go about it, but this is another tool in the toolbox in identifying the disease earlier. So that's one. So that one is going to be reviewed by the NIH. Knock on wood, it'll go favorably. It's due in October when they were reviewing that, so we're hoping for success on that one. The next is the COPES project. It stands for Community Placed Engagement Site. Dr. Cornelius leads this effort, and the idea behind it is to make sure that whatever research is being done is in community. You know, getting people to come down to Madison, not an easy sell. So this would be a way to actually bring the research to Oneida. And we've applied for funding, and we have not yet heard, but we're hoping to hear back from our application for funding. And if that one doesn't work, I promise you we'll go another route. So we're going to keep trying. And it also would be interesting, too, to bring in the NARCH trainees as well to make sure that we're, again, building capacity for new talent. And then finally, this is one I'm really excited about. I spent the weekend working on it. So it's called the Index or Indigenous Dementia Diagnostic Workflow. And this is some of the most exciting things coming out right now are our ability to test for what's happening in the brain, test with things like just a blood test. So there's a blood test now that's approved by the FDA for Alzheimer's disease. And this is, we've been talking about this for probably a decade now, a blood test for Alzheimer's disease. We have blood tests for a lot of different things like cancers or for other illnesses. This actually brings a very complicated task of testing what's happening in the brain with proteins in the blood. So Oneida, so it's at market right now, but really the places where you can get this blood test done are pretty limited. So people who are going to profit off this are things like a typical diagnostic company. Maybe Oneida could be one of the folks who actually, maybe one of the organizations that has the blood test and can maybe bill for it. So the idea is to bring it here to be the blood test that they actually have control over. So this is an infrastructure grant. This one goes in November, and like I said, I'm working on it right now. So for all projects, just some again, just to reiterate, the approach is that we want to make sure that whatever we do in partnership with Oneida is serving the tribe's needs and goals. And I'm so grateful to the Community Advisory Board members who really keep us on track with that, making sure that whatever we do is aligned. The give first and no strings, as I mentioned, that the research didn't start with the tribe until a couple of years into our partnership. It was really just first about understanding what the tribe was asking for. And it really initially was around education and making sure that we understand best what's happening in this disease. Organic advocacy, it wasn't hard to find people who are touched by Alzheimer's disease. So again, we were approached to come and talk to Oneida. And Sacheen and I first crossed paths when I was coming up to the Yawʌक़ó meetings, and was just basically asked to be there, mostly to listen, but just to hear what the tribe was concerned about and answer whatever questions I could. If I didn't know the answer, I'd go back and find it. Capacity building, making sure that we're hiring from the tribe, that we're building indigenous leadership so that I can hand this off to someone. And hiring and involving indigenous scholars too. The data and sample sovereignty, this was right from the get-go something that we were aware that this is something we had to really be diligent about to make sure that whatever data are collected are owned by the tribe and under the control of the tribe. And then finally, just approaching everything that we do with cultural humility and making sure that we're trying to always dismantle the colonization and the infrastructure that was set up by that. And I think just to mention, there's a lot of key players here. Those branches that I talked about from that little acorn seed has gone in so many different directions, and it's like the best part of my job is working with Oneida, just to watch the growth, because I think too, like, there's just organic interest in fighting this disease. So lastly, I think are just the contact information that I just wanted to leave up in case people wanted to hear more about any of the projects that we have going on right now. And of course, if you have questions about anything I talked about, any concerns. And I really welcome sort of that question, that wariness, that makes perfect sense, why people have that caution.
Well, I appreciate the transparency that you are offering today, both of you today. The information will go out, and we're going to ask everybody, if you're watching, make sure that you send that link to somebody else. Make sure that you share this information. It's information that is going to be on YouTube. It's in our history here. It's on our Oneida Nation YouTube. So if you don't know where to go or to say, hey, go here, tell them Google Oneida Nation YouTube. And if they Google that, it'll come up and you'll see our page. And there's a lot of good information from other segments, but especially today, it's something that we'd like you to reach out and share with your family. There's so much information that people don't have. And because we don't share it broadly all the time, this is a project that's bringing this together, that's sharing and collaborating with all these resources that have been out there, and we're now bringing them together. And many of you know Lois Metoxen Strong and Marlene Summers, and now you know Sacheen Lawrence, Dr. Carey Gleason. Google the names, look on your email list, look on Facebook, see where you can get in touch with them. We do have the emails, and it's on the screen. You can see how to get your little pencil and pad out there and write it down, and then remember where you put it. There's a lot of resources here in Oneida, and we're very, very happy to say that we think we're first on board. We're the model of how to address these initiatives. We're all hitting that age where things just seem to be, out there so much, and you forget there's so much going on with technology advancing the way it is. You have to react immediately. And so don't worry that, I'm too slow to react. I can remember working here, we had one fax machine, served the whole building. And now hardly anybody knows what a fax machine is because it's immediately. Put it into your laptop, into your iPad, into your computer, press go, there it is. we used to send proposals off to Washington,
Yeah.
and it would take 4 or 5 days to get there. They'd review them, and it'd take another time. Nowadays, you press the button, boom, you've
Yeah.
got your answer. So things are quicker and a lot more efficient than we're able to handle sometimes. So think about it. Is the contact information easily accessible on the website? Yes. Go to the numbers or the emails,
I just put it back up for a couple.
and you'll see it. Xavier's putting it up there for us. So,
Take a picture with your phone.
yep, take a picture with your phone. There's, and like I said, you can go back and watch this segment again. Is there anything, Sacheen, you'd like to add that we forgot?
So I'm just gonna kind of, I guess, tell you or speak on my program that I am recruiting for. So I am currently seeking volunteers who are 45 and up because I have to have a specific age group, and I'm looking for individuals who are with or without memory problems. We usually go through a screening that takes about an hour. So if you're interested in joining, wish to learn more, or want to even have a discussion with me prior to joining, have any questions, you can give me a call. I'm trying to be in the office this week, but there's a little bit of construction going on right now. Our office is located at Ridgeview, which is 3759 West Mason, Suite 4. But we're going to be moving into Suite 5 soon, which is really exciting. But I encourage you to get in contact with me. I can tell you all about it. I don't pressure you to make a decision. I love talking about what the program is and kind of how the benefits of the program, because it's not only you being part of the study, we do a lot of other stuff besides you going to Madison. So, but if you want to learn more, feel free to give me a call at the 920-544-6647 or email me on my work number. Email me at my work email. See, my
We
memory.
know what you meant. Yeah.
Carey, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, you might have questions about why would a 45-year-old join a study that is studying Alzheimer's disease. And the reason being is, again, I talked about that longitudinal data, like watching people over time. But we're going to learn a lot about prevention strategies as well as detection strategies by asking people to come in before the onset of symptoms. Because, again, we know that the disease itself, the proteins are already changing decades before the onset of symptoms. So I just want to thank all of those. Many people have volunteered already, and I appreciate their commitment and their bravery for doing something that is out of the box. And what they've done, what they've given so far is amazing. And what I want to do is just promise to be a good steward of their data and the gifts that they're giving us.
Well, thank you. Thank you both for your time today. It's been a good session. It's been amazing information. And we will be back on Thursday. So we'll see you Thursday and have a great week. Nugiwa.
Anagua.